Tiana Brooks staggers from a blazing car wreck in rural Georgia, her hands trembling as she clutches her cracked phone, the night sky glowing orange from the flames swallowing her Prius whole. Two deputies, Victor Hayes and Carl Dunn, stand above the ditch, their smirks sharp as they mock her pleas, laughter slicing the humid air. She dials, voice quaking, "Director Pierce, it's me." Their faces drain white as sirens hum in the distance, but what war has she just ignited? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you're fired up for justice, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's explosive episode will leave you speechless. Tiana Brooks gripped the steering wheel of her Prius, the hum of the engine a steady pulse beneath her palms as she navigated a winding back road in rural Georgia, 30 miles outside Savannah. The night hung thick with summer heat, the kind that stuck to your skin like damp cotton, and the air conditioning blasted cool relief against her face. She'd spent the day at a tech summit in the city, her voice steady as she pitched data encryption solutions to a room full of suits, her dark blazer crisp despite the long hours. At 38, she'd clawed her way from a cramped apartment in Atlanta to a respected data analyst role, each contract a brick in the life she'd built for herself and her son, Malik. Now, at 10:15, all she wanted was to collapse. Then to her bed, 30 minutes from home, where Malik was probably sprawled on the couch with his video games waiting for her to walk through the door. The road stretched dark and lonely, flanked by scraggly pines that rustled faintly in the breeze, her headlights carving twin tunnels through the blackness ahead. She adjusted her rear-view mirror, catching a glimpse of her own tired eyes, and let her mind drift to the summit, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she replayed a federal contractor's nod of approval, a quiet win for a black woman who'd learned to navigate rooms where she was often the only one like her. The peace shattered when red and blue lights flickered up ahead, maybe 200 yards out, pulsing jaggedly across the asphalt. A checkpoint. Her stomach tightened, a reflex honed by years of driving while black, of knowing her skin could turn a routine stop into something else entirely. She slowed the Prius, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, as she pulled behind a rusted pickup that rolled through fast, waved on by shadowy figures in uniforms. Odd, she thought, her brow creasing as she glanced at the dashboard clock. This wasn't a main highway, just a backwater route near a hush-hush military base she'd consulted for once, a sprawling compound ringed with barbed wire and whispers of classified projects. Checkpoints here weren't normal, not unless something big was brewing, and the hairs on her neck stood up as she eased forward, stopping where a portable floodlight bathed the road in a harsh, sterile glow. Two deputies stepped into view, their navy uniforms patched with county badges that glinted in the beam. Victor Hayes was the shorter one, burly and broad-shouldered, his jaw clenched like a pit bull's, eyes narrowed under a cap, dripping with sweat. Carl Dunn towered beside him, lanky and gaunt, his posture slouched with a swagger that screamed trouble, his thin lips twitching as if he were already savoring some private joke. They moved with the slow, deliberate strut of men who owned this stretch of nowhere, boots scuffing the ground as they sized up her car, their gazes lingering on the Prius's sleek lines like it was an insult they couldn't quite place. Tiana lowered her window, the muggy air rushing in, and met their stares with a calm she'd practiced too many times, a shield against the kind of men who saw her success as a threat, her presence as something to unravel. She'd dealt with their type before, small-town lawmen who bristled at a black woman driving anything nicer than a junker, and she knew the drill: keep it steady, keep it polite, don't give them an inch to twist. "ID," Hayes barked, skipping any pretense of courtesy. His voice rough as gravel scraped across steel. He leaned in, peering past her into the Prius's interior, his flashlight beam slashing across the dashboard, the leather seats, the black laptop bag resting on the passenger side. Tiana reached into her purse, a simple canvas tote she'd slung beside her, and pulled out her driver's license, her fingers steady despite the prickle of unease creeping up her spine. She handed it over, the plastic cool against her skin, and tilted her head slightly, keeping her tone even but firm. "Mind telling me what this is about, officer?" She wasn't new to this game. Questions could diffuse the tension or light her fuse depending on their mood, and she watched Hayes's eyes flick from the card to her face, his jaw tightening as if she'd just spat in his coffee. Dunn snatched the license from Hayes's grip, holding it up to the floodlight with exaggerated care, like he was inspecting a forged bill at a gas station. "You in a hurry, ma'am?" he drawled, his lips curling into a smirk that bared many teeth, his voice slow and syrupy with mockery. He tilted his head, studying her name, Tiana Brooks, then let his gaze drift back to her, lingering on her blazer, her car, her very existence. "Just a routine check. Gotta keep these roads clean." He paused, his smirk widening as he tapped the license against his palm. "Nice car, though. Real fancy for out here." Tiana's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching under her skin, but she kept her voice level, refusing to let them see the heat rising in her chest. "It's mine. Bought it last year," she said, nodding toward the license still dangling in his hand. "That's all in order, right?" She could feel their stares shift, not just to her words but to who she was, a black woman alone in a luxury hybrid on their turf, the unspoken accusation hanging heavy in the humid air, loud as a siren. They didn't need to sound. Hayes grunted low in his throat, stepping closer to the window, his flashlight sweeping over her again, the beam catching her eyes for a split second before settling on the Prius's plush interior. "Fancy ride for someone like you," he said. His words dripping with venom, each one a jab at her skin, her success, her right to be here. "Where'd you get the cash for this? Must have been some kind of windfall." His tone wasn't curious. It was a blade, sharp and accusatory, laced with contempt that didn't bother hiding itself, the kind that assumed she couldn't belong unless she'd cheated her way in. Her pulse quickened, anger flaring hot and bright in her chest, but she swallowed it down, years of survival teaching her that reacting was a gift she couldn't afford to give them. "I'm a data analyst," she said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the thick air like a knife through butter. "I consult for companies, some government contracts too. That's how I afford it." She met Hayes's stare, unflinching, daring him to push further, to say the quiet part out loud. But Dunn chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that grated on her nerves like nails on slate. He flicked her license against his palm again, then let it slip from his fingers, watching it flutter to the dirt at her feet with a lazy grin. "Oops," he said, his eyes glinting as she unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned out to grab it. The move forcing her to stretch low, her blazer brushing the dusty gravel. She felt their gazes heavy on her, mocking and predatory, and snatched the card up, brushing off the grit as her cheeks burned with humiliation she refused to let show. "Sorry about that," Dunn added, his grin widening. "Not sorry at all." His voice dripping with fake regret as he rocked back on his heels. "Clumsy me." Tiana straightened, sliding back into her seat, her grip on the wheel tightening until her knuckles ached, the leather creaking under her fingers. "Is there a reason for this stop?" she pressed, her voice sharper now, though still controlled, the edge of her patience fraying as she locked eyes with Hayes. "I've got a son waiting at home. I'd like to get moving." Hayes's smirk stretched wider, his thick fingers tapping the roof of her car with a dull thud that echoed in the stillness. "Oh, you'll move when we say you can," he said, leaning in so close she could smell the sour tang of tobacco on his breath, his bulk blocking out the floodlight. "For a moment. We're just getting started. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am, now." His tone turned cold, the pretense of routine crumbling away, replaced by something darker, more deliberate, a power play she could feel in her bones, raw and racial, the kind she'd faced too many times growing up in a world that saw her as less. She hesitated, her mind racing. This wasn't about traffic or safety, it was about her, her skin, her car, her confidence, all of it a script they couldn't stomach. "Why?" she asked, locking eyes with him, her voice steady despite the drumbeat of fear in her chest. "What's the probable cause?" Dunn laughed again, louder this time, slapping his thigh like she'd told the punchline of the year. "Probable cause? Hear that, Victor? She's a lawyer now." He stepped back, gesturing grandly at the empty road, his arms wide like a showman. "We don't need your fancy words out here, sweetheart. Get out, or we'll pull you out." Tiana's heart pounded, a rhythm of fear and fury she couldn't silence, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the wheel harder. She knew her rights, knew they were overstepping. But she also knew the stories, the headlines, black faces gone from stops like this, families left to mourn. She thought of Malik, waiting alone, and the stakes sharpened into focus. With a slow, deliberate breath, she unlatched her door and stepped onto the asphalt, her flats clicking softly in the silence, the floodlight casting her shadow long and thin, a solitary figure against two men itching for a fight. Hayes circled her, his boots kicking up dust while Dunn leaned against her car, arms crossed, his grin never fading. "Let's see what you're hiding," Hayes said, his voice low and menacing, a hunter sizing up prey. "A ride like this out here doesn't add up." He nodded at Dunn, who cracked his knuckles with a theatric pop, both of them closing in, their intent crackling in the air like static before a storm. She stood tall, shoulders squared, refusing to shrink, her words a shield she hoped would hold. "I've got nothing to hide," she said, her voice firm, but the air thickened with their malice, and she knew this was only the beginning, a spark about to ignite something she couldn't outrun. Hayes smirked, his hand darting to her arm, yanking her forward with a force that made her stumble, while Dunn popped the trunk with a smug flourish, rummaging through it like a vulture picking at carrion. They tossed out her gym bag, a spare tire, a stack of Malik's comic books, and then Dunn froze, his grin stretching wide as he held up a baggie of white pills, the kind that screamed felony. "Well, well," he said, tossing it to Hayes with a lazy flick. "What's this, Miss Analyst, your little side hustle?" Tiana's world tilted, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the baggie, her voice rising sharp with panic she couldn't hide. "That's not mine. You planted it. I saw you." She pointed at Dunn, her arm trembling, but he just shrugged, crossing his arms with a taunt. "Saw me? Prove it." Hayes weighed the baggie in his hand, his grin a predator's triumph as he stepped toward her, the plastic crinkling in his fist. "Drugs in the trunk, that's a felony, sweetheart. You're not going anywhere but with us." He grabbed her arm, his grip iron tight, and yanked her toward the cruiser parked 20 feet away, its lights flashing red and blue like a trap snapping shut. She stumbled, flats catching on the uneven ground, her mind screaming denials as she twisted against his hold. "It's not mine," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "You set me up. This is a lie." But Dunn just laughed, following behind with a swagger that made her skin crawl, kicking her scattered belongings deeper into the dirt. "Keep talking," he said, his voice a low, mean drawl. "Makes it more fun when we lock you up." The cruiser loomed closer, its back door yawning open, and Tiana's thoughts spun wild. Malik waiting at home, her career, her reputation, all teetering on this moment. They didn't just want to stop her, they wanted to erase her, and as Hayes shoved her inside, slamming the door with a clang that echoed in her skull, she knew the night had just erupted into a war she couldn't escape. Tiana Brooks sat rigid on a mouldy bench in a dank county jail cell, the air heavy with the stench of mildew and rust, her wrists throbbing where the cuffs had bitten into her skin. The concrete walls loomed close, stained with grime and scratched, with faded names, a testament to the forgotten who'd been here before her. Her flat stuck to the sticky floor, the sound of her shallow breaths mingling with the drip of a leaky pipe somewhere in the shadows. The flickering bulb overhead buzzed like a dying fly, casting jagged pools of light across her lap, her blazer wrinkled and smeared with dirt from the checkpoint scuffle. Her mind raced, replaying the night's spiral, the deputies' sneers, as they dragged her from her Prius, the baggie of pills they'd planted with smug grins, the cruiser door slamming shut on her pleas. She thought of Malik, 16 and lanky, probably pacing their modest Savannah home by now, his phone buzzing with unanswered texts, wondering why she hadn't walked through the door with her usual tired smile and a promise of pizza. Her chest tightened, a knot of fear and fury twisting beneath her ribs, but she kept her face still, refusing to let the panic crack through. She'd faced racism before, subtle jabs in boardrooms, sidelong glances at gas stations, but this was a sledgehammer, raw and deliberate, a system rigged to crush her under its weight. Footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and slow, and Victor Hayes appeared beyond the bars, his burly frame filling the narrow gap, his cap tilted back to reveal eyes glinting with malice. Carl Dunn slouched beside him, lanky and loose-limbed, twirling her cracked phone between his fingers like a trophy he'd won in some twisted game. Hayes leaned against the bars, his thick arms crossed, his smirk a blade twisting in her gut. "Comfortable, Princess," he drawled, his voice rough as gravel kicked across pavement, each word dripping with contempt. "Bet that fancy job of yours don't feel so big now, huh?" He tapped the bars with a knuckle, the dull clang reverberating in the cramped space, a taunt meant to burrow under her skin. Dunn chuckled, a low rasping sound that scraped her nerves raw, stepping closer to peer at her through the iron grid. "Yeah, all them government contracts, all that book smarts," he said, his grin stretching wide, teeth flashing in the dim light. "Ain't gonna get you out of this hole. You're just another number now, sweetheart." He tossed her phone up, catching it with a slap, his eyes locked on hers, daring her to flinch. Tiana's jaw clenched, her nails digging into her palms as she fought the urge to snap back, to tell them exactly what she thought of their petty power trip. She knew their game. They wanted her to break, to give them an excuse to tighten the screws, and she wouldn't hand it over. Instead, she straightened her spine, her voice cutting through the stale air like a shard of glass, sharp and steady despite the tremor threatening to rise. "I get a call," she said, locking eyes with Hayes, her gaze unyielding. "That's my right. You can't keep me here without it." The words hung there, a challenge she hoped might shift the ground beneath them, a lifeline she'd memorized from years of knowing the law could be her only shield in a place like this. Hayes's smirk faltered for a split second, a flicker of irritation crossing his bulldog face, but he recovered fast, snorting as he glanced at Dunn. "Hear that, Carl? She's quoting the rule book," he said, his tone mocking as he shoved off the bars, his boots scuffing the floor. "Thinks she's still in charge." Dunn tilted his head, his grin twisting into something uglier, his fingers tightening around her phone as he stepped closer, close enough she could smell the sweat on him, sour and stale. "You want your call?" he said, his voice low and mean, a snake coiling to strike. "Fine. Let's see who you think's gonna save you." He tossed the phone through the bars, and it clattered to the concrete at her feet, the screen spiderwebbing further from the impact. She scooped it up, her hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins, the cold plastic a tether to the world beyond this cage. She rose, stepping to the bars, her flats clicking softly, and faced them down, her voice a quiet blade. "Open the door, I'll make it now." Hayes grunted, his eyes narrowing as if weighing whether to push back, but he fished a key from his pocket, unlocking the cell with a slow, deliberate twist, the metal groaning as it swung open. "One call," he said, his tone cold, stepping aside just enough for her to pass. "Make it quick or we'll drag you back in here ourselves." Dunn followed her out, his lanky shadow trailing like a vulture, his grin never fading as they led her to a wall-mounted phone in the hall, its cord tangled and coated with grime. She stood there, the receiver heavy in her hand, the deputies looming behind her, their breaths loud in the silence, expecting her to dial a lawyer or a friend, someone they could dismiss with a laugh. Her mind raced, flipping through options, until it landed on a name she hadn't spoken in years, Elias Pierce, the FBI director who'd mentored her a decade ago when she was just a data cruncher with big dreams. He'd seen her potential, guided her through the maze of federal contracts, and now at the top of the bureau, he was her ace in the hole. She dialed his personal number, digits etched into her memory from late-night strategy sessions long past, her fingers trembling slightly as the line rang once, twice, her breath hitching as she prayed he'd pick up. Pierce, his voice, came through deep and gravelly, tinged with the late-hour fatigue of a man who never stopped working. "Who's this?" Tiana glanced at Hayes and Dunn, their smirks still plastered on, and lowered her voice, a whisper laced with urgency. "Director Pierce, it's Tiana Brooks. I'm in trouble. 2 deputies stopped me at a checkpoint near the military base in rural Georgia, planted pills, arrested me. I'm in a cell at the county jail now, and they're lying. I need help." Her words tumbled out fast, each one a lifeline thrown into the dark, her eyes flicking to the deputies as she spoke, catching the moment Hayes's smirk twitched, Dunn's grin freezing mid-laugh. Pierce's tone shifted, sharp with alarm, cutting through the static like a blade. "Tiana, slow down. County jail near the base, planted drugs? That's a federal offense if it's our turf. Stay put, I'm sending people now. You're sure they framed you? She gripped the receiver tighter, her knuckles whitening as she nodded, though he couldn't see it. Positive. I saw them do it. They mocked me, trashed my car, everything. Please, hurry. She caught Hayes tilting his head, his ear straining toward her hushed words. Dunn's eyes narrowing as FBI slipped from her lips, a single syllable that hit them like a jolt. Pierce's voice turned to steel, a promise she clung to. Hold tight, you're not alone, I've got you. The line clicked off and she hung up, her heart pounding with a fragile spark of hope as she turned to face them, her chin high despite the tremor in her hands. Hayes's face drained of color, his thick fingers flexing as if itching to grab her, while Dunn's grin vanished, his lanky frame stiffening like a cornered animal. Who'd you call, huh? Hayes barked, stepping closer, his voice a low growl that barely masked the unease creeping in. Some lawyer, buddy? Tiana met his stare, her voice steady, a quiet defiance flaring bright. Someone bigger. You'll see. Dunn laughed, but it was forced, a brittle sound that cracked in the air as he leaned against the wall, his eyes darting to Hayes. Big talk, he said, rapping the bars with his knuckles. Hope it's worth it. Hayes grabbed her arm, his grip bruising as he shoved her back into the cell, the door slamming shut with a clang that echoed down the hall. You'll regret that, he snarled, his breath hot through the bars, his eyes glinting with a promise of vengeance as he turned away, Dunn trailing behind, their footsteps fading into a tense murmur. Tiana sank back onto the bench, the mouldy fabric creaking under her weight, her wrists stinging as she rubbed them absently, the faint wail of sirens growing louder in the distance. She'd played her card, turned their game on its head, but as the bulb flickered above, casting her shadow, long and thin, she wondered what price she'd just set in motion, what storm she'd unleashed by daring to fight back. Her call had rattled them, stripped their smugness bare, but their vow hung heavy in the air, a threat that promised this was far from over, a war brewing beyond these walls she couldn't yet see. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think. Tiana's call to Pierce was a genius move to flip the script on these corrupt deputies. Or number 2, if you're worried their retaliation's about to hit her harder than ever. Hit that like button if her grit in this cell has you hooked, and subscribe because you won't believe the chaos crashing in next. Will Pierce's rescue pull her out of this pit, or has she just lit a fuse she can't put out? Stick around to find out what these deputies do when their power slips through their fingers. Tiana Brooks slumped against the damp concrete wall of her cell, the mouldy bench creaking beneath her as the distant wail of sirens grew into a sharp, insistent howl outside the rural Georgia County Jail. Her wrists ached, red rings blooming, where the cuffs had cut into her skin, and her blazer hung loose, smeared with dirt from the checkpoint brawl. The flickering bulb overhead buzzed louder, a nagging drone that matched the pulse pounding in her ears. Her cracked phone clutched, tight in her lap like a lifeline. She'd called Elias Pierce, the FBI director, her old mentor, and his promise of help echoed in her mind, a fragile thread keeping her from unraveling. The deputy's threat, "You'll regret that," lingered heavy in the stale air. Their footsteps long faded down the hall, but she could still feel their smirks, their malice seeping through the bars like a toxin. Her thoughts spun to Malik, her 16-year-old son alone at home, probably staring at the clock as 11:30 ticked past, his texts piling up unanswered. She pictured his lanky frame hunched over the couch, controller in hand, waiting for her to breeze in with a tired laugh, and the knot in her chest tightened, fear and fury warring beneath her ribs. The cell door's groan snapped her back, the metal screeching as it swung wide, and a woman strode in, her presence slicing through the gloom like a blade. Agent Lena Carver, mid-30s and wiry, wore a black suit that hugged her frame, her FBI badge gleaming on her belt, her dark eyes sharp with purpose. Her boots thudded on the sticky floor, flanked by 2 agents in tactical gear, their rifles slung low, radios crackling with static. "Tiana Brooks?" Carver asked, her voice clipped but steady, a lifeline thrown into the dark. Tiana nodded, rising on shaky legs, her flat scuffing the concrete as she stepped forward, relief flooding her like cool water on a burn. "That's me," she said, her throat tight, the weight of the night pressing down even as hope flickered. Carver swung the bars wider, gesturing to the hall. Director Pierce sent us. You're free to go. Her eyes swept the cell, landing on Tiana's raw wrists, and a flicker of anger crossed her face before she turned, barking orders to the agents trailing her. Tiana followed, her steps uneven, the dank air giving way to the cooler bite of the jail's main room, where Victor Hayes and Carl Dunn stood near the desk, their smug grins gone, replaced by flushed faces and darting eyes. Hayes's burly frame tensed, his thick hands balling into fists, while Dunn's lanky posture shrank, his fingers twitching as if itching for a fight he couldn't win. Carver marched straight for them, holding up the baggie of white pills Hayes had tucked away, the plastic crinkling in her grip. "This yours?" she asked, her tone slicing through the silence, her eyes locked on Hayes like a hawk on prey. "Found it in her trunk, right? Funny thing, we ran it on the way here. Prints match you, Dunn, not her." She tossed it onto the desk with a soft thud, the sound loud in the sudden stillness, and Dunn stammered, his voice cracking as he stepped back. "That's hers. We found it clean. She's lying," he insisted, his grin a ghost of itself, sweat beading on his gaunt forehead. Hayes nodded frantically, his bulldog jaw clenching as he crossed his arms, his bulk filling the cramped space. "Fair, routine stop, she got mouthy, we checked her out, that's all," he said, his words tripping over each other, a flimsy shield against the storm crashing in. Carver's lips curled into a thin, icy smile, her gaze boring into them like a drill. "Routine, huh? Planting evidence is a federal crime, especially this close to our base. You're on notice." She turned to the desk sergeant, a wiry man with a pinched face who hovered near the counter, his badge reading Tully. His eyes wide as he swallowed hard. "Keys to her car," she snapped, holding out her hand, "and her phone now." Tully fumbled in a drawer, producing Tiana's Prius keys, the silver glinting faintly, and handed over her cracked phone, its screen glowing despite the spiderweb fractures. Carver passed them to Tiana, who clutched them tight, her fingers trembling. With a rush of shaky triumph, the weight of captivity lifting like a fog burning off at dawn. "You're clear," Carver said, her voice softening slightly as she nodded to the agents, who ushered Tiana toward the exit, their boots thudding. In unison. "We'll get your stuff from the road, let's move." Tiana followed, the night air hitting her like a wave as she stepped outside, warm and thick but freer than the cell's stifling grip, the stars peeking through a haze above. The jail's sodium lights buzzed behind her, casting long shadows. Across the gravel lot where black SUVs idled, their engines a low growl promising safety. Carver paused beside her, scanning the perimeter, her jaw tight. "Pierce is furious," she said, almost to herself. "This isn't just local nonsense, it's too close to our turf." She met Tiana's eyes, a spark of respect flickering there. "You did good calling him." Tiana managed a weak smile, her voice steadying as she rubbed her wrists. "I had to. They wouldn't stop." She glanced back at the jail where Hayes and Dunn watched through the window, their faces shadowed but tense, and turned away, climbing into her Prius as an agent retrieved it from the checkpoint site, its trunk still open, papers fluttering in the breeze. She drove home, the road blurring past, her chest swelling with vindication, the deputy's panic replaying in her mind like a victory reel. 30 minutes later, she pulled into her driveway, a modest, single-story house nestled in a quiet savannah. "Suburb," the porch light glowing soft against the night. Malik rushed out, his lanky frame bounding down the steps, eyes wide with worry, his voice cracking as he threw his arms around her. "Mom, where were you? I called, but it kept going to voicemail." Tiana hugged him tight, the cracked phone a silent explanation in her pocket, her breath hitching as she kissed his forehead. "I'm okay, baby. Just a long night. Let's get inside." They settled on the couch, Malik curling up beside her, and she exhaled, the tension unwinding slowly, her body sinking into the cushions as the clock ticked past midnight. She'd call Pierce tomorrow, thank him properly, maybe even laugh about it someday. The deputies' smug faces crumbling under the FBI's glare. The nightmare was over, she told herself, her eyes drifting shut, the weight of the cell fading into a distant hum. A crash shattered the quiet. A brick sailing through the living room window, glass exploding inward across the hardwood, landing with a thud on the rug. Tiana jolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs as Malik yelped, scrambling behind her, his hands gripping her arm. She snatched the brick, its rough edges biting her palms, and stared at the words scrawled in black marker, jagged and raw. "Go back where you came from, Nan." Followed by, "You're next." Her stomach dropped, the air sucked out of the room, her hands shaking as she clutched the brick, dread curling around her like smoke. She stumbled to the window, peering through the jagged hole, the night still and dark beyond the blinds, no sign of who'd thrown it. But the message burned into her vision, a hate-fueled promise that turned her relief to ash. She pulled Malik close, his breath hitching against her shoulder, and stared at the shattered glass, the deputies' faces flashing in her mind, their threat no longer just words but a physical wound in her home. The FBI had freed her, stripped, their power bare. But this was their answer, a strike that cut deeper than cuffs, a vow that this war was far from won. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed Carver, her voice low and fierce as the line rang. The sirens from earlier a hollow echo now. "Lena, they're not done," she said, when the agent picked up, her words tumbling out fast. "A brick, a slur, a threat, they just hit my house." Carver's voice hardened, a storm brewing on the other end. "Stay put, I'm on it, lock the doors." The call ended, and Tiana bolted the front door, her hands shaking as she shoved a chair against it, Malik watching with wide, terrified eyes. She'd walked free, thought she'd beaten them, but as the night pressed in, the brick a silent taunt on the floor, she knew this was only the beginning, a spark igniting a fire she couldn't outrun. Tiana Brooks jolted awake on her couch, the faint grey of dawn seeping through the blinds of her Savannah home, her neck stiff from a night spent guarding the shattered living room window. The brick lay on the coffee table, its jagged slur glaring. Up at her, a venomous scar from the deputy's midnight strike. Her cracked phone buzzed beside it, Agent Carver's late-night promise of patrols, a thin comfort against the dread pooling in her gut. Malik slept upstairs, his door cracked open, his soft snores a fragile tether to normalcy after the chaos of the checkpoint, the jail, the rescue. She rubbed her eyes, the raw ache in her wrists a reminder of the cuffs, the deputy's laughter still echoing in her skull, Victor Hayes and Carl Dunn's faces branded into her memory. The Prius sat in the driveway, its trunk still littered with scattered papers, a silent witness to their brutality. She'd thought the FBI's arrival had ended it, stripped their power bare, but that brick, that threat, "You're next," told her they weren't done, their hatred a beast that wouldn't rest. A sharp knock rattled the front door. 3. Hard raps that yanked her to her feet, her heart slamming against her ribs as she gripped the baseball bat she'd left by the couch, its wood cool and solid in her hands. She crept to the window, peering through the blinds, expecting Hayes's bulldog sneer or Dunn's lanky swagger, but instead saw a woman in a grey blazer, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, a clipboard clutched in her manicured hands. Tiana unbolted the door, bat still in hand, and opened it a crack, her voice low and wary. "Who are you?" The woman's lips pursed, her eyes flicking to the bat with a prim frown before meeting Tiana's gaze, her tone clipped and officious. "Ruth Klein, Child Protective Services. Are you Tiana Brooks?" Tiana's stomach dropped, the air thickening around her as she nodded slowly, her grip tightening on the bat. "Yeah, that's me. What's this about?" Klein flipped a page on her clipboard, her smirk a thin slash of contempt as she read aloud in a monotone that dripped with accusation. "We received an anonymous tip about drug use in this home, endangering a minor, one Malik Brooks. Corroborated by Officers Hayes and Dunn, who reported your arrest for possession last night. I'm here to assess your son's safety." Her eyes darted past Tiana, scanning the living room, lingering on the broken window, the brick, as if they were evidence of guilt rather than attack. Tiana's blood boiled, her voice rising sharp and incredulous, cutting through the quiet morning like a blade. "That's a lie. They planted those drugs, framed me, trashed my car. The FBI cleared me. It's all a setup." She stepped forward, blocking Klein's view of the stairs, her body a wall between this woman and Malik, her mind racing as the Pieces snapped into place, Hayes and Dunn's revenge striking deeper than she'd feared. Klein's smirk widened, her pen tapping the clipboard with a rhythm that grated on Tiana's nerves, her tone icy and unyielding. Her rested, clear doesn't matter. We've got credible reports and I've got authority to take your son if I see fit. Step aside or I'll call for backup. Her hand hovered near her pocket, a threat veiled as procedure, and Tiana's chest heaved, fury surging hot and bright as she pictured Malik's lanky frame dragged from his bed, his trust in her shattered by their lies. "You're not taking him anywhere," she snapped, her voice a low, fierce promise, the bat trembling slightly in her grip as she held her ground, daring Klein to push further. Footsteps crunched outside, swift and purposeful, and Agent Lena, Carver, appeared on the porch, her wiry frame taut with urgency, her FBI badge flashing in the dawn light. "Ruth Klein, right?" Carver barked, her voice a whip crack that made Klein flinch, her dark eyes locking onto the CPS agent with steel. "Resolve. Stand down." She shoved a tablet under Klein's nose, its screen glowing with data, her words slicing through the tension. "You're Hayes' cousin, second degree, linked through county records. This anonymous tip came straight from him and Dunn, the same two caught tampering with evidence last night. This is retaliation and you're in on it." Klein's face drained of color, her clipboard slipping slightly in her grip as she stammered, retreating a step. "I'm just doing my job. The report was legitimate. I have to follow protocol," she said, her voice cracking, her eyes darting to the street as if searching for an escape. Carver didn't blink, her gaze boring into Klein like a drill, her tone low and lethal. "Protocol? You're colluding with corrupt deputies to harass a federal consultant. I've got your file, Ruth. 2 prior complaints of bias, hushed up by family ties. Walk away or I dig deeper." She tapped the tablet, pulling up a call log, her breath visible in the cool air. "Pierce is 1 call away. Want me to ask him if CPS can snatch a kid on a frame job?" Klein froze, her prim facade cracking, then bolted down the steps without a word, her heels clacking on the concrete as she fled to her sedan parked across the street, the engine roaring to life as she peeled out, taillights vanishing into the haze. Tiana exhaled, her knees weak, and dropped the bat, pulling Malik into a fierce hug as he stumbled downstairs, his braids messy, eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his voice small, and she squeezed him tight, her throat tight with relief. "It's okay, baby, she's gone, we're safe." Carver turned to her, her fierce expression softening, her hands on her hips. "You okay?" "That was too close. They're hitting you where it hurts." Tiana nodded, gratitude flooding her as she ushered Malik back inside, locking the door behind them, the click a small comfort against the storm. "Thank you, Lena. I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, her voice steadying as she sank onto the couch, Malik curling up beside her, the adrenaline ebbing into exhaustion. Carver lingered on the porch, speaking into her radio, her voice a steady hum as Tiana closed her eyes, the CPS threat a bullet dodged, her son still hers, the deputy's latest jab thwarted. She dared to hope they'd back off, their power, stripped twice now, first by the FBI, then by Carver's quick strike. The quiet stretched, a fragile peace settling over the house until her phone rang, shattering it like glass under a boot. She grabbed it, the cracked screen flickering as she answered, her boss's voice cutting through Greg Tanner, a gruff man she'd worked with for 5 years at the data firm. "Tiana, we've got a problem," he said, his tone heavy with reluctance. "Clients are calling, freaking out. Someone leaked your arrest, said you're mixed up in drugs. I've got to suspend you until we sort this out. I'm sorry." Tiana's breath stopped, her hand clutching the phone so hard it hurt, her voice shaking as she stood pacing the living room, Malik watching with wide, worried eyes. "Greg, it's not true. The deputies framed me. The FBI's involved. They cleared me. You know me, I've never touched that stuff." Greg sighed, the sound rough and resigned, a man caught between trust and pressure. "I believe you, but the optics are bad. Major contracts are on the line. We can't risk it until the dust settles. Take some time, we'll figure it out." The call ended, and Tiana stared at the phone, the room spinning, her career, her lifeline, The thing she'd built from scratch to give Malik a future, crumbling under the weight of their lies. She sank back onto the couch, her head in her hands, the victory over Klein turning bitter in her mouth, Hayes and Dunn's faces flashing in her mind, their laughter at the jail now a taunt she couldn't shake. They'd lost the CPS battle, but they'd struck deeper, slashing at her reputation with a blade she couldn't dodge, a wound that bled worse than any cell. Malik touched her arm, his voice small, his braids brushing her shoulder. "Mum, what's wrong?" She forced a smile, hiding the storm inside, her words a shield she barely believed. "Just work stuff, baby, I'll fix it." But as she stared at the dawn beyond the blinds, the brick still glaring from the table, she knew they weren't done, their vendetta afire spreading beyond her control, a war she'd thought she'd won now raging anew. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Tiana's strength in shutting down CPS proves she's unbreakable, or number 2 if you're raging at how Hayes and Dunn keep hitting her where it hurts most. Smash that like button if her fight to protect Malik has your heart pounding, and subscribe because the next twist will leave you speechless. Has Tiana finally turned the tide against these deputies, or are they cooking up something even darker to bury her for good? Keep watching to see how far their revenge will stretch. Tiana Brooks stood at her kitchen sink, the morning sun slicing through the blinds of her Savannah home, casting thin stripes across the untouched mug of coffee cooling in her hands. The brick from last night sat on the counter, its racial slur, a silent taunt beside her cracked phone, the screen dark after Greg's call suspending her from work. Malik shuffled upstairs, his sneakers thumping as he got ready for school, his quiet, "Love you, Mum," from the hall, a fragile anchor in the storm. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion sinking deep into her bones. The weight of the past 48 hours, a lead blanket, the checkpoint, the jail, the CPS threat, all piling up like debris after a wreck. The broken living room window gaped behind, her glass still scattered on the hardwood, a wound from Hayes and Dunn's midnight strike she hadn't had time to mend. She'd beaten them twice, first with Pierce's rescue, then with Carver's shutdown of Klein, but the job loss stung, a fresh cut from their lies, her career dangling by a thread they'd frayed with spite. The doorbell chimed, a shrill note that made her flinch, her hand darting to the baseball bat propped against the counter, its wood scratched from last night's grip. She edged to the front door, peering through the peephole, expecting Carver's wiry frame or another CPS flunky, but instead saw a news van parked at the curb, its logo garish in the morning light. A young reporter, microphone thrust forward like a spear, stood on her porch, her voice bright with urgency, as Tiana cracked the door. "Miss Brooks, Kelly Ortiz, Channel 7. We've got reports of your arrest at a checkpoint. Drug charges. Gun FBI intervention. Care to comment?" A cameraman loomed behind her, lens trained on Tiana's face, capturing the shock flickering across her features as her stomach plummeted, the air sucked out of the room. "How did you—" she started, then stopped, her mind racing. Pierce and Carver the only ones beyond her family who knew. No one else she'd told. "No comment," she said, her voice tight, and shut the door, leaning against it as her pulse hammered, the reporter's knocks fading into a dull thud. She grabbed her phone, scrolling fast, and froze. Her name blazed across a headline on the local news site. "Drug bust gone wrong. Data analyst arrested. Freed by FBI." Her mugshot staring back, eyes wide with defiance, time-stamped from the jail. Below it, a blurry photo of her Prius on the highway, trunk gaping, papers strewn like wreckage, the story spinning her life into a lie. Malik bounded downstairs, backpack slung over one shoulder, and stopped short, his lanky frame tensing as he caught her expression, his voice small. "Mum, what's wrong?" She forced a smile, hiding the screen, her words a shield she barely held up. "Nothing, baby, just some work stuff. Go catch the bus." He hesitated, his braids swinging as he nodded, then slipped out the back door. The school bus rumbling away as Tiana's phone buzzed with texts, neighbors asking if she was okay. Malik's friend's mom saying kids were whispering at school. A crash shattered the quiet, a rock smashing through the kitchen window, glass exploding across the tile, landing with a thud near the sink, black marker scrawling "Leave N ear" in jagged strokes. Tiana's knees buckled, her hands shaking. As she dialed Carver, her voice trembling but fierce as the line rang. "Lena, it's everywhere, news, my mugshot, a rock through my window. They're ruining me." Carver's tone was grim, fury seeping through. "Hayes and Dunn leaked it. We're tracking the source, it's viral. Stay inside, I'm calling Pierce." Hours later, Tiana watched on her laptop as Elias Pierce stood before a podium in Atlanta, his broad frame commanding the screen, FBI seal stark behind him, his voice booming through the grainy feed. "Tiana Brooks is a valued consultant falsely, accused by corrupt local deputies. We have evidence of tampering and harassment. She's innocent and we're pursuing charges. Reporters fired questions, but he shut them down. His authority absolute. The broadcast cutting to a statement from Greg, suspension lifted, full support reinstated." Tiana exhaled, a weight lifting, her chest swelling with vindication as she texted Malik, "We're okay now," sinking into the couch, daring to hope the storm had passed. The relief curdled as her phone lit up with notifications, a flood drowning her calm, a video hitting social media, racking up thousands of views. In minutes, doctored dashcam footage from Hayes' cruiser, time-stamped from the checkpoint night. It showed her stepping out of the Prius, but the audio twisted her calm refusals into shrill screams. "You can't touch me." Her image lunging at Dunn, edited to look violent, resisting with feral rage. The caption reading, "FBI darling," or "Thug, you decide." Comments poured in, "Typical liar, lock her up," her heart sinking as the lie spread, so vivid it felt real. She refreshed the feed, desperation clawing at her, and saw the damage bloom, Malik texting, "Mom, kids are sharing it, they're calling me names." Neighbors posting photos of the broken windows, speculating she'd brought trouble. Protesters gathered outside, a dozen at first, then more, their voices rising in a chant, "Justice for the cops." Eggs splattering against her front door, yellow streaks dripping down the wood, a bottle cracking the porch light, plunging. The yard into shadow. Tiana pulled the blinds shut, her breath shallow, the mob's anger a physical weight pressing in, Malik rushing downstairs, his eyes wide as he clutched his phone. "Mom, they're out there, what do we do?" She grabbed the bat, her voice low and urgent. "Stay back, help me move this." Dragging the couch to barricade the door, her hands trembling as the chants grew louder, fists pounding the wood, the frame groaning under the strain. A bottle crashed through the living room again, glass skittering across the floor, and Tiana ducked, pulling Malik down, his breath hitching against her shoulder as she shielded him, the bat useless against the swelling roar. She dialed Carver, her fingers shaking, the line ringing as the mob's shouts pierced the walls. "Get her out here." A slur cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Lena, they're at my house, dozens of them, breaking in," she said. When Carver answered, her words tumbling out fast, her heart racing as a rock smashed another pane, the blinds rattling. Carver's voice hardened, a storm brewing. "Hold on, we're 5 minutes out, lock yourselves in." The call cut, and Tiana pulled Malik toward the stairs, her flats slipping on glass as they scrambled up, ducking into his room, shoving, his dresser against the door, its drawers rattling as she wedged it tight. The window overlooked the backyard, dark and still, a fleeting hope of escape, but the chants circled the house, a noose tightening. No feds, no lies, gunfire popping outside, warning shots into the sky. Tiana crouched by Malik, his hands gripping hers, his voice a whisper. "Mom, they're gonna get in." She stroked his braids, her own pulse hammering. "No, baby, help's coming." But the words felt hollow, the mob's fury a beast she couldn't outrun. Downstairs, the front door bucked under a battering ram, the couch scraping across the hardwood with a screech, and Tiana grabbed Malik's bat from his closet, its weight cold in her hands, standing between him and the door, every muscle coiled. As the dresser shook, fists hammering the wood, a man's voice snarling, "Open up, liar!" Sirens blared closer, a chopper's thrum vibrating the air, and the pounding paused. A murmur rippling through the crowd, headlights sweeping the yard, red and blue flashing through the blinds. Tiana dared to peek. Black SUVs roaring up, FBI, agents spilling out, their shouts a thunderclap. "Disperse now or you're under arrest," Carver's voice booming through a megaphone, gunfire popping as warning shots scattered the mob, some bolting into the night, others tackled to the grass. The siege collapsed, agents storming the house, their boots crunching glass as Carver kicked in the front door, now hanging off its hinges, and raced upstairs, shoving the dresser aside with a grunt. "Tiana," she called, her face grim but steady as Tiana unlocked the door, pulling Malik into her arms, his breath ragged against her chest. "You're safe," Carver said, holstering her weapon, wiping sweat from her brow. "We've got 10 in custody, linked to Dunn's online posts. This was orchestrated." Tiana nodded, her throat tight, hugging Malik closer, relief flooding her as the chaos faded, the nightmare thinning into a hum. She thought it was over, Pierce's press conference a shield, the mob's retreat a win, until a shadow flickered downstairs, swift and silent, a Molotov cocktail sailing through the broken window, flames licking up the curtains with a roar, the rug igniting in a blaze that swallowed the room. Tiana screamed, shoving Malik behind her, grabbing a blanket to smother the fire, her lungs burning with smoke, as Carver shouted into her radio, "Arson! Now! Get units in!" The flames crackled, a wall of heat driving them back, and Tiana stumbled, Malik coughing beside her, the victory over the mob turning to ash as the house burned, Hayes and Dunn's laughter echoing in her mind, their hatred a fire she couldn't quench. Tiana Brooks stood in her smoke-choked living room, the acrid sting of burnt curtains clogging her throat, as she smothered the last flickers of flame with a soaked blanket, her hands trembling from the Molotov cocktail's blaze. The hardwood glistened wet and blackened, glass shards glinting under the dawn light, seeping through the shattered windows of her Savannah home. Malik coughed beside her, his lanky frame hunched, his braids brushing her arm as he gripped her shoulder, his voice ragged. "Mum, it's gone, they burned it." Agent Lena Carver paced near the splintered front door, her wiry silhouette barking orders into her radio, her badge glinting as agents swarmed the wreckage, their boots crunching. "Debris. Arson unit now, perimeter's compromised," she snapped, her voice taut with fury, her dark eyes flicking to Tiana, softening briefly. "You're okay, we've got this." Tiana nodded, her chest heaving, the bat still clutched in her hand, its wood warm from her grip. The mob's retreat a hollow win as the fire's heat lingered on her skin. She'd beaten them again, Pierce's press conference scattering their lies, Carver's team breaking their siege, but the deputy's hatred burned brighter than the flames, Victor Hayes and Carl Dunn's shadows stretching long beyond the jail. She pulled Malik close, his breath steadying against her, and dared to believe the worst had passed, the house scarred but standing, her son safe in her arms. A shadow moved swift in the haze, Hayes bursting from the kitchen, his burly frame unbowed, a pistol gleaming in his thick hand, sweat streaking his bulldog face. "You called the feds, now pay," he snarled, lunging for Malik, his grip iron tight as he yanked the boy from Tiana's grasp, shoving him toward the back door with a force that made her stumble. Tiana screamed, a raw, guttural sound tearing from her throat, her bat swinging wild as she charged. But Hayes fired a shot into the ceiling, plaster raining down, the crack stopping her cold. "Back off," he roared, dragging Malik outside, his boots scuffing the wet grass as he hauled him to a rusted pickup parked in the alley, its engine growling to life. Tiana bolted after them, her flats slipping on the slick floor, her voice breaking as she shouted, "Malik!" He twisted in Hayes's hold, his eyes wide with terror, his hands clawing at the deputy's arm, but the truck door slammed shut, tires screeching as it peeled out, vanishing into the morning mist. Tiana collapsed to her knees, her fists pounding the ground, tears streaming as Carver rushed to her side, her radio crackling with urgency. "Hayes took him. Pick up heading west. Get a chopper up now," she barked, her hand gripping Tiana's shoulder, pulling her to her feet with steel resolve. "We'll find him, I swear." Tiana wiped her face, her breath hitching as she nodded, the fire of a mother's rage igniting through the haze, her voice low and fierce. "I'm coming with you." Carver hesitated, then handed her a spare vest, its weight cold and solid. As Tiana strapped it on, her hands trembling but sure, the bat still clutched tight, a weapon she'd wielded for her son. They piled into Carver's SUV, the engine roaring as it sped through Savannah's quiet streets, 2 more vehicles flanking them, lights flashing a grim procession cutting through the dawn. Carver gripped the wheel, her jaw tight, her voice clipped over the hum. "Chopper's got a heat signature. Warehouse 10 miles out, old industrial lot near the river. Witness saw a boy matching Malik's description in the back." Tiana's stomach twisted, her fingers digging into the bat's grip, every second a lifetime as the city blurred past, her mind screaming questions she couldn't voice. Why Malik? Why now? What would Hayes do to break her further? The warehouse loomed ahead, a crumbling shell of brick and rusted steel, its windows dark, Hayes's truck parked crooked by the loading dock, headlights off. Carver signaled her team, a silent arc forming around the building, rifles glinting. In the faint light as she pulled Tiana close, her whisper sharp. "Stay behind me, we go in fast." Tiana nodded, her breath shallow, the bat a cold comfort as they crept forward, the morning alive with the chirp of crickets and the thud of her pulse. Carver kicked the side door wide, splinters flying, and shouted, "FBI, hands up!" Light, flooding the space from tactical flashlights, revealing dust-caked crates and tangled chains swaying in the gloom. Malik sat bound in the corner, duct tape gagging his mouth, his eyes wide with terror, his lanky frame slumped against a rusted pipe. Hayes stood over him, his pistol steady, sweat gleaming on his brow, his voice cracking with desperation as he swung the barrel toward Carver. "Back off! She's mine now!" he roared, his thick frame trembling, a cornered beast ready to snap. Tiana lunged, bat raised high, her scream a war cry as she swung for his head. But Carver yanked her back, her grip iron tight, hissing, "Not yet." Agents flanked the room, their beams pinning Hayes in a web of light, rifles trained as Carver called out, her tone ice-cold. "Drop it, Hayes, you're surrounded, this ends here." His eyes darted wild and unhinged, then he snarled, firing a shot that punched through a crate, wood splintering inches from Carver's shoulder, the warehouse erupting in chaos. Agents returned fire, bullets ripping through the air as Tiana broke free, charging with the bat. Her rage a tidal wave as she swung, the wood cracking against Hayes's knee with a sickening thud that buckled him. He yelped, the pistol slipping from his grip, clattering to the concrete, and Carver tackled him, cuffing his wrists as he thrashed, blood seeping from his leg, his snarls fading into a groan. Tiana dropped the bat, rushing to Malik, her fingers tearing the tape from his mouth and wrists, his sobs breaking free as he clung to her, tears soaking her shirt. "Mom, I was so scared," he gasped, his voice small, his hands trembling against her back, and she rocked him gently, her own tears streaming, relief crashing over her like a wave. "I've got you, baby," she whispered, her breath hitching as she held him tight, the warehouse's chaos fading into a distant hum, agents securing the scene, their radios buzzing with updates. Carver approached, her face softening, wiping sweat from her brow as she holstered her weapon. "He's okay, no injuries, we'll get him checked out," she said, her voice steady as she glanced at Hayes, now slumped against a crate, his smugness gone, replaced by a grimace of defeat. Tiana stood, Malik leaning on her, her flat scuffing the dusty floor as they stumbled outside. The morning air cool against their flush skin, Hayes glaring from the ground, his eyes burning with hate even in cuffs. She met his stare, her chin high. A mother who'd fought and won, her heart swelling with triumph as they climbed into an SUV, the warehouse shrinking in the rear view, the nightmare buried in its shadows. Carver drove, her hands steady on the wheel, the silence thick until a radio crackled beside her. Dunn's voice cutting through the static, low and chilling, a vow that froze Tiana's blood. "This ain't over," he hissed, the line cutting, dead. His words a dagger in the quiet, a promise that turned her victory bitter. She pulled Malik closer, his head resting on her shoulder, and stared out the window, the Savannah skyline blurring past, the deputy's reach stretching beyond. Hayes's defeat, a storm brewing she couldn't see. She'd saved her son, cracked Hayes's knee, thought the FBI's grip had ended it. But as the radio's echo lingered, she knew they'd strike again, harder, their hatred a beast that wouldn't die. Drop a comment with number 1 if you're cheering Tiana's fierce swing to save Malik from Hayes's grip, or number 2 if you think Dunn's creepy promise means she's in deeper danger than ever. Slam that like button if her mama bear rescue has you on edge, and subscribe because the next chapter's going to hit like a freight train. Has Tiana finally crushed these deputies' vendetta, or is Dunn lurking in the shadows with a blow she won't see coming? Stay tuned to find out what's brewing in this relentless fight. Tiana Brooks slumped in the back of an FBI SUV, the engine's low rumble vibrating through her as it rolled away from the warehouse, her arms wrapped tight around Malik, his lanky frame trembling against her after Hayes' abduction. The morning sun bled through the tinted windows, casting faint streaks across her cracked phone clutched in her lap. Dunn's chilling radio vow, "This ain't over," still ringing in her ears like a ghost she couldn't shake. Agent Lena Carver rode shotgun, her wiry silhouette tense, her radio crackling with updates as she glanced back, her voice clipped. "We're taking you to a safe house 10 miles out, rural spot near the river. Hayes is cuffed, but Dunn's loose and we're not risking it." Tiana nodded, her chest tight, her flat scuffing the floor mat as she pulled Malik closer, his braids brushing her cheek, his breath shallow but steady. "Wherever keeps him safe," she said, her tone firm despite the tremor in her hands, the bat resting beside her, its wood scratched from cracking Hayes' knee. The convoy wound through Savannah's outskirts, the city giving way to dense pines and rutted roads, the safe house emerging as a squat brick building, its windows dark, flanked by overgrown scrub. Agents in black fatigues fanned out, rifles slung across their chests, their movements sharp as Carver led Tiana and Malik inside, the air cool and thick with the scent of dust and old wood. The interior was sparse, a cot in one corner, a small table with a flickering lamp, a single door to a back room, and Tiana settled Malik on the cot, tucking a blanket around him, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Rest, baby," she whispered, kissing his forehead, her heart aching as he nodded, curling up under the coarse fabric. Carver stood by the window, peering through the blinds, her badge glinting as she turned, her voice low. "Pierce got word from the jail Hayes is singing, says Sheriff Amos Reed, his uncle. Runs a militia tied to this mess. We're digging, but you're secure here." Tiana exhaled, her shoulders sagging, hope flickering as she sank into a chair, the bat propped against her leg. The warehouse rescue a fragile wind she clung to. Days blurred into a tense rhythm, the safe house a cocoon of quiet dread. Malik sketching comics on scraps of paper, Tiana pacing the creaky floor, Carver's updates a lifeline. Raids hitting Reed's crew, they're crumbling. She dared to believe it, the deputy's grip slipping, Hayes locked up, Dunn's threat just noise. On the third evening, as dusk settled thick over the pines, headlights flared outside, a convoy of pickups and ATVs roaring up the dirt road, their engines, a guttural snarl that shook the walls. Tiana jolted upright, her pulse racing as Malik scrambled to her side, his voice a whisper. "Mom, what's that?" Carver ducked to the window, her pistol drawn, her face hardening as she peered out, her words sharp. "Militia. Reed's men. Surrounding us, 20 strong." A megaphone crackled, Sheriff Amos Reed's gravelly voice booming through the night, his tone thick with venom. "Tiana Brooks, you've brought tyranny to our county. Surrender or we take what's ours." Shots rang out, warning blasts splitting the sky, and Tiana ducked, pulling Malik behind the cot, her hands trembling as bullets punched through the brick, dust raining down, the bat useless against rifles. Carver crouched beside her, peering. Through the blinds, her voice taut. "They're armed heavy, closing in." She shouted into her radio, "FBI, stand down or face consequences." But her words drowned in a hail of gunfire, the militia advancing, their slurs slicing through the chaos. "Get that Fed puppet out here." Glass shattered, a bottle crashing through the back window, flames licking up the wall as a Molotov cocktail ignited, the heat searing Tiana's skin as she grabbed a coat, smothering the blaze, her lungs burning with smoke. Malik's coughs, piercing her ears. The front door bucked under a battering ram, wood splintering with a groan, and Carver fired through the gap, a bearded man howling as he fell back, blood pooling on the porch. Tiana swung the bat at another who breached the window, his grizzled face twisting in rage, the wood cracking against his jaw with a sick thud, sending him sprawling. But more surged in, boots stomping the floor, rifles glinting in the flickering light. Malik screamed, "Mom!" and Tiana spun, shielding him as a man lunged, his fist raised with a crowbar, the metal glinting as it swung toward her head. Carver tackled him, her elbow slamming his throat, his gasp choking off as he dropped writhing on the ground. Sirens wailed closer, a chopper's thrum pulsing overhead, and floodlights bathed the yard in white glare, FBI tactical units storming. In black-clad figures with shields and rifles, their shouts a thunderclap, "Drop your weapons!" Gunfire erupted, a brutal clash as bullets tore through the air, bodies hitting the grass, the militia faltering under the onslaught. Reed's voice roared over the megaphone, "Hold the line!" But his men scattered, some firing wildly, others fleeing into the pines. Agents dragging Reed from a truck, his grizzled face bloodied, cuffs snapping around his wrists as he spat curses, his sheriff's badge glinting mockingly in the light. Tiana clutched Malik, the siege collapsing around them, smoke curling from the charred wall, the floor littered with glass and shell casings, her breath ragged as Carver stood, wiping sweat from her brow, her voice hoarse. "It's over. Reed's down. We've got him." Tiana exhaled, the bat slipping from her grip, her body sagging as agents secured the perimeter, their radios buzzing with victory, the safe house scarred but holding, Malik's hands gripping hers, his eyes wide but safe. She thought the nightmare had broken, Reed's militia crushed, Hayes in cuffs, the FBI's mightier shield she could trust, her son still breathing beside her. The chaos settled, agents combing the wreckage, their flashlights sweeping the shadows, and Tiana leaned against the cot, her flat scuffing the dusty floor, relief washing over her like a tide, the deputy's empire crumbling under Pierce's fist. She dared to hope, to believe she'd outlasted their hate. The safe house a battered fortress that had held firm. A shadow flickered in the back room, swift and silent. Carl Dunn emerging from the gloom, his lanky frame unbloodied, his eyes wild with hate, a knife gleaming in his bony hand. He'd slipped through the firefight, a ghost presumed lost in the chaos, but alive, unhinged, his breath ragged as he lunged at Tiana, the blade slashing the air inches from her chest. "How ruined me," he snarled, his voice a jagged rasp, his arm swinging again as she stumbled back, Malik screaming, "Mom!" his hands clawing at the cot. Dunn grabbed her arm, the knife slicing her sleeve, a thin line of blood blooming on her skin as he yanked her toward the back door, his grip tightening, the steel cold against her wrist. "We're everywhere," he hissed, his breath hot on her ear, kicking the door open, the night swallowing them as he hauled her into the yard, the pines looming dark and thick. Tiana clawed at his hand, her nails drawing blood, but he twisted harder, the knife pricking her side, a sharp sting that made her gasp, her flat slipping on the damp grass as he dragged her deeper into the shadows. Agents shouted behind, their beams sweeping the yard, Carver's voice cutting through. "Dunn, stop!" Her pistol raised, but he used Tiana as a shield, his arm locking around her neck, his snarl a promise of worse to come. "Shoot, and she's dead," he yelled, his body trembling but unyielding, pulling her toward the trees, the safe house shrinking in the distance, Malik's cries fading as the deputy's vendetta roared back to life, a blade at her throat proving they'd never let her go. Tiana Brooks stumbled through the pines behind the safe house, the damp Georgia night wrapping around her like a shroud, Carl Dunn's knife pressing cold against her ribs, a thin sting where it nicked her skin through her torn sleeve. His lanky arm locked tight around her chest, his breath hot and sour with rage as he dragged her backward, her flat scraping the muddy earth, the safe house's flickering lights fading into the trees. "You thought you'd win," he snarled, his voice a jagged rasp, his grip tightening as she clawed at his wrist, her nails drawing blood, the wet grass slick under her feet. FBI agents shouted behind, their beams slashing through the dark. Agent Lena Carver's voice cutting sharp. "Dunn, let her go," her pistol steady, red sniper dots dancing across his shoulder from rooftops nearby. Tiana's heart pounded, her mind racing, Malik's screams echoing from the safe house, her son safe but out of reach, Dunn's blade a heartbeat from ending her fight. She caught Carver's gaze, a silent plea, and saw the agent's jaw clench, her finger twitching on the trigger. "You're done," Carver called, her tone ice cold. "No way out." Dunn laughed, a wild, unhinged bark, and yanked Tiana tighter, the knife shifting, its pressure easing for a split second as he turned to spit at the agents. "I'll take her with me." She seized the moment, adrenaline surging like a flood, driving her elbow back into his ribs, the crack of bone sharp in the night, his grunt a choked gasp as his hold loosened. She twisted, her knee slamming into his thigh, and he staggered, the knife clattering to the roots below, his lanky frame buckling as she broke free, stumbling toward Carver, her breath ragged. Carver fired, a single clean shot ringing out, the bullet ripping through Dunn's arm, blood blooming dark as he collapsed, writhing in the mud, cursing her name. Agents swarmed, cuffing him tight, his snarls fading as they hauled him off. And Carver steadied Tiana, her hands firm on her shoulders, her voice urgent. "You hurt?" Tiana shook her head, her hand flying to her ribs, feeling the shallow. Cut, warm and sticky, her voice hoarse. "Malik, where's Malik?" Carver nodded toward the safe house. "Inside safe, come on." They raced back, Tiana's flats pounding the grass, bursting through the back door to find Malik huddled by the cot, his eyes wide, rushing into her arms, his braids brushing. Her cheek as he sobbed, "I thought he'd kill you." She held him tight, tears streaming, relief crashing over her. "I'm here, baby. I've got you." The chaos thinning as agents secured the perimeter, Dunn's knife glinting in the Tui yard, a relic of his defeat. Hours later, Tiana sat in a new FBI SUV, the engine humming as it sped along a back road, Malik beside her, his head resting on her shoulder, the safe house a smoldering memory in the rear view. Carver rode shotgun, her wiry frame tense, her radio crackling as she briefed them, her voice clipped. "New spot 30 miles out off-grid near a lake, Pierce's elite units guarding it. Dunn's down, critical but alive. Reed's confession cracked open a hate syndicate, national reach, they've got your name. We're locking you down." Tiana's hand rested on Malik's knee, her fingers trembling despite the calm she forced. The cut on her ribs throbbing beneath a hasty bandage, her flats caked with mud. "How big?" she asked, her throat dry, dread pooling as Carver met her eyes in the mirror, her expression grim. "Coast to coast, racist network. Reed's just a cog. They're reeling from raids, but they're not done." The convoy rolled. Tond, the landscape shifting to rolling hills and thick woods. The new safe house emerging, a low concrete bunker with steel shutters, its edges softened by tangled vines. Agents in black fatigues patrolling with rifles, their faces stern under the dusk light. Carver led them inside, the interior stark, cots lined against one wall. A kitchenette with a humming fridge, monitors flickering with security feeds. "Tate's best," she said, gesturing to the guards. "You're untouchable here." Tiana settled Malik on a cot, tucking a blanket around him, his sketchbook clutched tight as he drifted off, her heart aching as she watched him breathe. Safe for now. She joined Carver by the screens, the feeds showing the perimeter. Wood stretching dark and silent, her flats scuffing the concrete as she sank into a chair, hope budding like a fragile shoot, Pierce's promise of raids a shield she dared to trust. Days passed in a tense hush, the bunker a fortress of quiet, Malik sketching superheroes battling shadowy foes, Tiana poring over the feeds, Carver's updates a lifeline. Syndicate hubs hit hard, leaders nabbed in 5 states, they're fracturing. On the 4th day, Elias Pierce called, his deep voice crackling through a secure line. "Tiana, we're dismantling them. Your name's clearing. Stay put. We've got this." She exhaled, a weight lifting, the deputy's empire crumbling. Hayes and Dunn beaten, the syndicate's claws retracting, her son sketching beside her, a flicker of normalcy in the gloom. She dared to smile. The bunker's walls a bulwark against the storm until dusk fell, the sky bruising purple beyond the steel shutters, and a deafening boom shattered the quiet, the ground shaking as a fireball erupted outside, the transport. SUV in the driveway exploding in a roar of heat and twisted metal. Tiana jolted upright, her scream lost in the blast, debris raining down as flames licked the air. Malik bolting from his cot, his sketchbook tumbling as he cried, "Mom!" She pulled him behind the kitchenette counter, shielding him as shrapnel. Grazed his leg, a thin line of blood streaking his jeans, his gasp sharp against her ear. Agents shouted, diving for cover, Carver sprinting toward them, her face ashen, her radio crackling. "Car bomb! Secure the perimeter now!" Tiana's chest heaved, the acrid smoke stinging her lungs. Malik's whimpers a knife to her heart as she pressed a dish towel to his leg, her voice trembling. "Hold on, baby. You're okay." Carver knelt beside her, scanning the chaos, her voice grim. "This wasn't random syndicate hit. Reed from his cell leaked your spot online. We found chatter, national reach, not just local anymore." She gripped Tiana's arm, her eyes fierce. "We're moving you tonight. This is bigger than Hayes and Dunn." Tiana's mind reeled, the safe house's promise obliterated, her hands shaking as she held Malik. The bomb a thunderclap that turned her hope to dust. The deputy's network stretching beyond Georgia, a hydra with heads she couldn't count. Agents swarmed, medics patching Malik's leg, their hands swift as Carver barked orders. "New location now, double the guard." The monitors flickering red with breached alerts. The bunker's walls no longer a shield, but a target. Tiana cradled Malik, his blood staining her fingers, the explosion's roar echoing in her skull. Pierce's raids a hollow win against this relentless enemy. Her son's safety a mirage shattered by fire. The syndicate's reach a noose tightening. As the night pulsed with danger, their hatred a bomb she couldn't outrun. Drop a comment with number 1 if you're stunned Tiana keeps surviving these savage syndicate strikes, or number 2 if you think this bomb proves they'll never let her breathe easy. Hit that like button if her fight to shield Malik from this blast has you gripping your seat, and subscribe because the next blow's coming faster than you can blink. Did Pierce's raids really weaken this hate machine, or has Tiana just stepped into a bigger trap she can't escape? Keep your eyes peeled to see what explodes next in this relentless war. Tiana Brooks sat rigid in a sterile motel room, the hum of a cheap air conditioner buzzing through the walls as she cradled Malik's hand, his lanky frame stretched across a sagging bed, a bandage wrapping the shrapnel graze on his leg from the syndicate's car bomb. The northern Georgia night pressed against the window, a faint drizzle streaking the glass, the flickering neon sign outside casting jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Her cracked phone lay beside her, its screen glowing with Elias. Pierce's last text, "New safe house tomorrow, hold tight." A promise she clung to after the bunker's fiery collapse. Her flats, still caked with mud from Dunn's ambush, scuffed the thin carpet as she paced, the cut on her ribs throbbing beneath a bandage, her blazer torn and stained from nights of running. Malik stirred, his braids spilling over the pillow, his voice small. "Mom, we're okay now, right?" She forced a smile, brushing his forehead. "Yeah, baby, we're getting there." But her chest tightened, Dunn's knife, Hayes's abduction, the bomb, a relentless tide of hate she couldn't outpace. Agent Lena Carver stood by the door, her wiry frame slumped slightly, blood crusted on her sleeve from the firefight, her radio silent after hours of barked updates. "Pierce has the raids rolling," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Syndicates cracking, you're clear to testify remotely tomorrow. Congress wants your story." Tiana nodded, her hands trembling as she gripped a laptop Pierce had sent, its screen dark but ready, a chance to turn her pain into a spear against the beast that hunted her. Morning broke grey and heavy, the motel's stale coffee bitter on. Her tongue as she set up the laptop, Malik sketching quietly beside her, his pencil scratching a superhero blasting through flames, a mirror to her fight. Carver patched her into a secure congressional feed, the screen flaring to life with a panel of lawmakers, their faces grainy but stern, a gavel's echo signaling the start. Tiana straightened, her voice steady as she faced them, her flats planted, firm on the carpet. "My name's Tiana Brooks, data analyst, mother and target of a racist syndicate that's torn my life apart." She recounted the checkpoint, Hayes and Dunn planting drugs, mocking her skin, her car, her existence. The jail cell's taunts, the brick through her window, CPS at her door, the mob's eggs and fire, Malik's abduction, the militia's rifles, the bomb's roar. Each word a hammer striking the silence. "This isn't just rural Georgia, it's systemic, coast to coast, and I'm proof," the lawmakers murmured, their nods slow but weighty. A senator's voice cutting through. "We're launching a federal probe. Indictments pending. Your testimony's a spark, Ms. Brooks." The call ended, and Tiana exhaled. A fragile hope. blooming as Malik squeezed her hand, his eyes bright. "You did it, Mom," Pierce called minutes later, his deep voice crackling through the speaker. "Tiana, you broke their spine. Raids hit hard. Syndicate leaders nabbed. 5 states. You're a hero. Task force role's yours if you want it." She blinked, the offer a lifeline piercing the haze, her voice firm. "I'll do it," picturing her pain forging a shield for others, a purpose rising from the ashes. Carver grinned, handing her a contract from her vest, the paper crisp despite. The blood fleck on her cuff, and Tiana signed, her hand steady, the pen scratching a vow to keep fighting. Days later, Malik's leg healed, the graze a faint scar under fresh gauze, and Tiana dared to smile, the motel a temporary bunker. Carver. Guarding the door, Pierce's elite units sweeping the perimeter, their rifles glinting in the dusk light. News broke on a muted TV, indictments rolling out, syndicate hubs raided, Hayes and Dunn's names buried in the fallout, Reed's militia a fractured relic, justice a fragile light piercing the dark. She sank onto the bed, Malik sketching beside, her his pencil tracing a figure in a cape, hope budding like a crack in stone, the task force a beacon she'd lead, her fight turning systemic rot into reform. The quiet shattered as Carver's radio flared, an agent's voice breaking through. "Breach, mole inside, location leaked." And Tiana's breath stopped, her hand clutching Malik's as the door buckled under a blast, smoke billowing in. 3 figures storming through, black hoods and assault rifles, their movements precise, deadly. She yanked Malik behind the bed, her heart racing as bullets tore into the walls, plaster raining down, the laptop crashing to the floor, its screen splintering. Carver dove behind a chair, her shots felling one attacker, his body crumpling with a wet thud, blood pooling on the carpet, but the others advanced, their rifles swinging, a guttural shout. "She's ours!" slurs lacing their rage. Tiana spotted a fallen agent's pistol, its grip slick with sweat, and snatched it, her hands shaking but sure, her flat slipping on debris as she rose, shielding Malik, her voice a low growl. "Stay down." She'd never fired a gun, but for her son, she'd learned fast, the weight foreign yet fierce in her palms, her mind flashing to the checkpoint, the jail, every blow she'd taken fueling her now. An assassin rounded the bed, his rifle swinging toward them, his hood shadowing a sneer. And she pulled the trigger, the recoil jarring her arm, the bullet ripping through his chest, his stagger a slow collapse as he hit the floor, his blood soaking the carpet, a crimson stain she'd never unsee. She gasped, the kill sinking into her bones, her hands trembling as Malik clung to her, his breath hitching. "Mom, you—" The third lunged at Carver, a knife flashing in his gloved hand, slashing toward her throat, but she twisted, snapping, his wrist with a crack, her knee smashing his jaw, sending him sprawling unconscious, his blade clattering to the tile. Silence fell, broken only by the drizzle's patter outside. The room a battlefield of smoke and bodies, Carver standing, blood streaking her face, her voice grim. "Syndicate hit squad, Mole tipped them off, low-level analyst sold us out, he's nabbed." Tiana lowered the gun, her hands shaking, Malik's arms tight around her. A graze on his arm bleeding red from a ricochet, medics rushing in, their hands swift as they patched him up, Carver radioing Pierce, her tone raw. "Safe." House hit 3 down, Mole's court were compromised. Tiana cradled Malik, her vision blurring with tears, the gun slipping from her grip, the testimony's triumph a hollow echo as the syndicate struck back, their reach piercing the FBI's shield, a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. She'd killed, to protect her son, exposed their rot to Congress, signed on to fight. But the bunker's walls crumbled, the task force a target, not a shield, the syndicate's claws slashing deeper, a war she couldn't escape. Tiana Brooks sat on a stiff chair in a rural Georgia hospital room, the antiseptic tang sharp in her nose as she gripped Malik's hand, his lanky frame stretched across a bed, a fresh bandage wrapping the graze on his arm from the syndicate's safe house ambush. The night pressed against the window, a faint mist fogging the glass, the hum of medical machines a stark contrast to the chaos of the past days, the checkpoint, the jail, the bomb, the hit squad. Her cracked phone rested on the bedside table, its screen dark after Carver's last update. "New safe house soon, we're tightening ranks." a thin thread of hope after the mole's betrayal. Her flats, scuffed and muddy from nights of flight, stuck to the linoleum as she shifted, the cut on her ribs pulsing beneath its bandage, her torn blazer slung over the chair, a relic of her fight. Malik's eyes fluttered, his braids splayed, across the pillow, his breath steady under a sedative, the graze shallow but the fear deep, his voice a murmur. "Mom, they're gone now, right?" She brushed his forehead, forcing a smile. "Getting there, baby." But her chest tightened. Dunn's knife, Hayes's grip, the gunfire, a relentless storm she couldn't outrun. Agent Lena Carver leaned against the door, her wiry frame taut, blood crusted on her sleeve from the firefight, her radio silent after hours of barked commands. "Mole's in custody. Syndicate's reeling," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "Raids hit their hubs, your testimony's paying off. Malik's safe now." Tiana nodded, her hands trembling as she rubbed her wrists, raw from past cuffs, hope flickering as she watched Malik sleep. The hospital, a temporary shield, Pierce's promise of justice, a light in the dark. Morning crept in, pale and grey, the hospital bustling with soft footsteps as a doctor slipped in, a wiry man with a clipboard, his nod curt. "He's stable, no fragments, rest and he'll mend." Tiana squeezed Malik's hand, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you," her voice cracking, relief settling like a stone as the doctor left, the door clicking shut. Carver stepped closer, her eyes softening. "You're a fighter, Tiana. Pierce wants you on that task force. You're shaping this." Tiana exhaled, the offer a lifeline, her pain forging a weapon against the hate. "I'm in," she said, her tone steady, a spark of purpose igniting. Malik stirred, blinking awake. "Mom?" She leaned in, kissing his forehead. "I'm here. We're okay." The TV flickering on above, a muted news channel Carver had left running, its glow casting shadows across the sterile walls. She glanced up, expecting raid updates, and froze, the screen flaring with a breaking alert. "Sheriff Amos Reed escapes custody." Her breath halting as the room tilted, the anchor's voice cutting through. "Reed, indicted in a racist syndicate. Probe, freed from a holding cell by a corrupt judge. Last seen fleeing in a stolen truck, armed and dangerous." Tiana's heart sank, the chair creaking as she gripped it, the contract she'd signed slipping from her mind, fluttering to the floor like a broken promise. Carver spun, her face paling, grabbing her radio. "Pierce, confirm Reed's out." Her voice snapping, static crackling back. "Confirmed, judge took a bribe, sprung him an hour ago, we're tracking." Carver cursed, slamming the radio down, her eyes meeting Tiana's, a storm brewing. "He's not done. This is his move." The TV flickered again, a new clip rolling. Tiana's blood running cold as Reed's grizzled face filled the screen, wild-eyed on a shaky live stream, a dark highway stretching behind him. "Tiana Brooks is just the beginning," he snarled, his beard twitching with rage. "She thinks she's won, but we're everywhere, this ain't over." The feed cut to her old Savannah home, now a smouldering ruin, flames licking the night sky, a photo of her and Malik pinned to the wreckage with a knife, its blade glinting in the firelight, the anchor's voice urgent. "Officials call this a declaration of war from a national hate network." Tiana's hands shook, Malik's grip tightening, a whimper escaping his lips. "Mom, he's coming back." She pulled him close, her mind reeling. "No, baby, we'll stop him." But the words rang hollow. Reed free. His vengeance a wildfire she couldn't quench. Carver grabbed her shoulder. "We'll find him, you're not alone," her voice fierce. But as the TV looped the burning house, the pinned photo a taunt, Tiana knew the war had flared anew, her task force role a target, not a shield. Hours later, Malik stabilized, discharged with a limp, and Carver hustled them to the hospital lot, agents flanking them, rifles glinting as they piled into an SUV. "New safe house now," she barked, the engine roaring as it sped off. Tiana clutched Malik, the hospital shrinking in the dusk, when shouts erupted outside, a mob surging from the shadows, dozens strong, their voices rising in a chant. "No feds, no lies," their slurs cutting through the mist like shards of glass. Eggs splattered the windows, yellow streaks smearing the glass, a rock cracking the windshield, spiderwebbing the view as Tiana ducked, shielding Malik, his breath hitching. "Mom, they're here." She grabbed a stolen pistol from the floor, its weight cold and familiar from the hit squad, her flat slipping on the mat as she rose, peering out, the mob's faces twisted with hate. "Get the Fed puppet," a man roared, swinging a bat at the SUV's hood, metal denting with a groan. Carver floored it, tires screeching, but the crowd blocked the road, fists pounding the sides, a bottle shattering against the door, liquid trickling down. Tiana's pulse raced, her voice low. "Stay down," aiming the gun through a cracked window. Her hands trembling but sure, firing a warning shot into the air, the crack scattering a few, their yells faltering. A bearded man lunged, his crowbar raised, smashing the side mirror, glass raining as he snarled, "You're dead." And Tiana fired again, the bullet grazing his shoulder, blood blooming as he stumbled back, howling. The mob surged, more rocks, flying. A brick smashing the rear window, shards skittering across the seat. And Tiana shielded Malik, his cries piercing her ears. "Mom, make it stop!" Carver swerved, ramming through a gap, the SUV lurching as bodies parted, agents firing. From the flanking vehicles, their shots driving the crowd back, screams fading into the night. They broke free, the hospital a speck in the mist. Tiana's breath shallow as she lowered the gun, Malik clinging to her, his bandage stained with fresh sweat, the mob's retreat a jagged victory she couldn't savor. Carver's radio crackled. "Perimeter clear, safe house ETA 10 minutes. Her voice grim. "Reed's broadcast lit this fuse. He's orchestrating from the run." Tiana nodded, her throat tight. The hospital fight a blur as they sped on. The new safe house a fleeting promise, her hands shaking as she held Malik, thinking they'd outrun Reed's wrath, the task force a shield she'd wield. A sharp crack split the air, a sniper bullet grazing her shoulder, blood seeping through her sleeve, a hot sting that made her gasp. Dunn's laughter echoing from the pines nearby, his lanky shadow flickering in the dusk. "Missed me?" Tiana ducked, shoving Malik down, the pistol trembling in her grip as Carver floored it, tires screeching. "Sniper, move!" The SUV lurched, bullets pinging off the frame. Dunn's cackle a taunt proving nowhere was safe. Reed's escape a spark igniting a firestorm she couldn't dodge. Tiana Brooks gripped the pistol tight in the back of the speeding FBI SUV, her shoulder throbbing where Dunn's sniper bullet had grazed her, blood seeping through her sleeve as the vehicle roared down a rutted Georgia backroad. Malik huddled beside her, his lanky frame pressed against the seat, his bandaged arm trembling from the hospital mob's chaos, his braids brushing her cheek as he whispered, "Mom, he's still out there." The cracked windshield spider-webbed. Her view, the mist outside blurring the pines into a dark smear. Agent Lena Carver's hands white-knuckled on the wheel, her voice sharp. "He won't get far." The sniper shot had come minutes ago, Dunn's laughter echoing from the trees. A ghost slipping through the night after Reed's escape torched their fragile safety. Tiana's flats, muddy and torn, stuck to the mat, the gun's weight cold. In her palms, her mind racing Reed's broadcast of her burning home. The mob's slurs, a war she couldn't outrun. Carver's radio crackled, an agent's voice cutting through. "Dunn spotted, abandoned mill 15 miles east, near the swamp. Thermal picks up 2 signatures, one smaller, moving fast." Tiana's stomach twisted, her breath hitching as she met Carver's eyes in the rear view. "Malik?" Carver nodded, her jaw tight. "Matches his build. Hayes took him once. Dunn's doubling down." Tiana's grip tightened, fury surging. Like a flood. "Get me there." Her voice a low growl, the deputy's vendetta slashing deeper. Malik, her heart, they wouldn't rip away again. The convoy screeched to a halt a quarter-mile from the mill, dust billowing as agents spilled out. Rifles glinting in the faint moonlight, the mill looming ahead, a sagging hulk of weathered wood and rusted tin, its windows black, Dunn's shadow, a promise of terror within. Carver signaled her team, a silent arc forming around the structure, her whisper sharp. "Stay close, we hit hard." Tiana nodded, her flat silent on the damp earth as she followed, the pistol trembling in her grip, the bat lost to the hospital. Fight, this gun her only shield now, her shoulders sting a dull roar she ignored. Carver kicked the mill door wide, splinters flying, shouting, "FBI, hands up!" Tactical flashlights flooding the space, revealing rotting beams and tangled vines snaking through cracked walls. Malik sat tied to a chair in the center, ropes biting his wrists, his eyes wide with terror, his voice muffled behind a rag stuffed in his mouth. Dunn stood over him, lanky and wild, a knife gleaming in his bony hand, sweat streaking his gaunt face as he swung the blade toward Carver, his voice a ragged snarl. "She's mine, back off!" Tiana lunged, pistol raised, her scream a primal roar, "Let him go!" But Carver grabbed her arm, yanking her behind a beam, hissing, "Wait!" Agents flanked the room, beams pinning Dunn in a web of light, rifles trained as Carver called, "Out!" "Drop it, Dunn, you're done," her tone steel, her pistol steady. Dunn's eyes darted, a cornered animal. Then he laughed, a brittle crack splitting the air, slashing the knife an inch from Malik's throat. "I'll end her through him," his blade glinting as Malik flinched, his muffled cries piercing Tiana's chest. She broke free, charging with the pistol, her flats pounding the warped floor, but Dunn swung Malik's chair as a shield, the wood creaking as he ducked behind. "Shoot and he's dead." His snarl a taunt, his knife pricking Malik's shoulder, a thin trickle of blood staining his shirt. The mill erupted, agents firing warning shots into the ceiling, dust raining down as Tiana spotted a rusted pipe leaning against a crate, dropping the gun to snatch it, its weight solid in her hands, her shoulder screaming as she swung, the metal cracking against Dunn's wrist with a sickening snap. He yelped, the knife clattering to the floor, his lanky frame staggering as she swung again. The pipe smashing his knee, a thud that buckled him, his howl echoing off the walls. Carver tackled him, her knee pinning his chest, cuffing his wrists. As he thrashed, blood seeping from his arm where her shot grazed him earlier. Her voice a spit. "Are you done?" Agents swarmed, securing the scene, rifles lowering as Tiana dropped the pipe, rushing to Malik, her fingers tearing the ropes from his wrists, pulling the rag from his mouth, his sobs breaking free. "Mom, he was gonna—" She hushed him, cradling his face, tears streaming as she untied him. "I've got you, baby, it's over." His arms wrapping tight around her, his blood warm on her hands, relief flooding her like a tide. Carver stood, wiping sweat from her brow, her face softening as she holstered her weapon. "He's okay, shallow cut. Medics on the way." Her voice steady as agents dragged Dunn to his feet, his lanky frame limp, his eyes burning with hate even in defeat, his snarl a whisper, "You'll pay." Tiana met his glare, her chin high, a mother who'd fought and won again, her flat scuffing the dusty floor as they limped outside, Malik leaning on her, the swamp air cool against their flushed skin, the mill shrinking behind them. Dunn's last standard tomb she'd buried him in. Medics patched Malik's shoulder, their hands swift as Carver drove them to a new safe house, a concrete bunker 20 miles south, its steel shutters glinting in the dawn light, agents patrolling with rifles, Pierce's elite guarding every corner. Tiana settled Malik on a cot, his breath steadying as he clutched her hand. "We're safe now, right?" She nodded, kissing his forehead. "Yeah, baby." Her voice soft, the mill's chaos fading into a hum. Dunn's cuffs a victory she savored, Hayes locked up, Reed on the run, the syndicate's claws dulled by her fight. She sank into a chair, her shoulder bandaged, the pistol swapped for a blanket, hope flickering as Carver briefed her. "Dunn's down, Reed's next, we're closing in." Her words a promise Tiana dared to trust. The task force a beacon she'd wield, her son safe beside her. The quiet held, a fragile peace stretching through the morning, agents sweeping the perimeter, their radios a low buzz, until a broadcast crackled over a monitor, chilling her to the core, Reed's gravelly voice booming through static. "This is WRG News, militia forming in Clay County. I'm Sheriff Amos Reed. Tiana Brooks's FBI ties threaten our freedom. We're rallying armed locals, last seen near Route 9. Justice ain't dead." Tiana's breath stopped, her hand clutching Malik's as Carver spun, her face hardening. "He's back," barking into her radio. "Pierce, militia uprising, Reed's leading it, Malik's secure, but this just blew wide." Tiana pulled. Malik closer, his eyes wide. "Mom, he won't stop." his voice small, the bunker's walls a shield turned brittle, the relief of Dunn's defeat curdling into dread, Reed's vow a thunderclap reigniting the war, his broadcast a call to arms she couldn't silence. She'd beaten Dunn, smashed his wrist, freed her son, thought the syndicate's grip had loosened, but Reed's voice roared louder, turning her victory hollow, the deputy's vendetta exploding into a militia she couldn't outfight, the night pulsing with danger she couldn't escape. Tiana Brooks stood in the concrete bunker of the new safe house, the faint hum of generators vibrating through the walls as she adjusted a headset, her flat scuffing the cold floor, the bandage on her grazed shoulder itching beneath her torn blazer. The Georgia dawn filtered through steel shutters, casting thin lines across Malik's cot, where he sat sketching, his lanky frame hunched over a notepad, his bandaged arm steady as he traced a figure in armor, a quiet strength she clung to after Dunn's defeat at the mill. Her cracked phone buzzed on a metal table, Pierce's last message glowing. "Task force active, you're leading, we're crushing them." A lifeline after Reed's militia broadcast reignited the war. Agent Lena Carver paced by the monitors, her wiry silhouette sharp against the flickering feeds, her voice clipped. "Reed's rallying Clay County 20 miles out, armed locals. We've got tactical teams closing in." Tiana nodded, her chest tight. The pistol from the hospital swapped for a radio, its weight a new anchor as she spoke into the headset. "Pierce, it's Tiana. I'm ready." Her tone firm despite the ache in her ribs. Dunn's knife a memory, she'd buried with his cuffs. The safe house buzzed with agents, rifles glinting as they patrolled the perimeter. Pierce's elite guarding every corner, their radios a low hum weaving a net she trusted to hold. Days stretched into a tense rhythm, Tiana testifying again via secure video to a congressional committee, her voice steady as she faced the grainy lawmakers. "Hayes framed me, Dunn took my son, Reed burned my home. This syndicate's national. I fought it. You've got to end it." Her flats planted firm, Malik sketching beside her, his pencil scratching a hero's cape, a mirror to her stand. The committee murmured, a senator's voice cutting through, indictments rolling, reform pledged, "You're driving this, Ms. Brooks." And she exhaled, a fragile peace settling as Malik squeezed her hand. "You're winning, Mom." His eyes bright with pride. Pierce called, his deep voice booming. "Raids hit hard, syndicates fracturing, Clay County's under watch, you're safe, task force is yours." And Tiana smiled, the bunker a fortress, her role a beacon turning. Pain into power. Malik's sketches a lifeline in the gloom. Agents swept the perimeter, their boots thudding outside. Carver's updates a steady pulse. Reed's men scattering, we're closing the noose. And Tiana dared to breathe, the mill's victory. Dunn's broken wrist, a foundation she'd built on, Hayes locked up, Reed hunted. The syndicate's claws dulled by her fight. She sank onto a chair, Malik beside her, his pencil tracing a shield. The safe house's walls a bulwark she trusted, hope flickering like a candle in the dark. Her son safe, her voice shaping justice, the war's tide turning under her grip. Midday crept in, the monitors glowing with feeds of quiet woods, agents patrolling in tight arcs, and Tiana adjusted her headset, briefing Pierce's team. "Clay County's key, Reed's there, hit their supply lines." Her voice crisp, the task force a machine she'd steer to end this. Malik stretched, setting his notepad aside. "I'm grabbing water, Mum." His voice soft as he limped to the kitchenette, his bandage a faint outline under his sleeve, and she nodded. "Stay close, baby." Her eyes flicking to the feeds. The perimeter still, the agent's radios a low buzz. She turned back to the headset, Pierce's voice crackling through. "We've got eyes on Reed, he's pinned, this ends soon." And she exhaled, a weight lifting, the syndicate's empire. Crumbling, her son sketching 10 feet away, safety a promise she could taste. The quiet held, a fragile calm stretching through the afternoon. Agents rotating shifts, their rifles glinting in the sun, and Tiana leaned back, her flats tapping the floor, Malik's pencil scratching a faint rhythm from the kitchenette, the war's roar fading into a hum she dared to trust. She stood stretching her stiff shoulder and called, "Malik, you good?" Silence answered, a hollow void where his voice should have been, and her stomach dropped, her flats thudding as she rushed to the kitchenette. The notepad gone, the water bottle untouched on the counter, the back door cracked open, a faint breeze stirring the air. "Malik!" she shouted, her voice cracking, bursting outside, the agent spinning, rifles raised as she scanned the yard, the pines looming dark, no sign of him, her heart slamming against her ribs. Carver bolted to her side, her face ashen. "Where is he?" Her radio flaring. "All units breach, kids missing." Agents swarming the perimeter, beams slashing the trees. Tiana stumbled back inside, her flat slipping on the concrete, and froze, a note lying on Malik's cot, scrawled in Reed's blocky hand. "You took mine. I took yours." The paper trembling in her grip, a dagger to her soul as she sank to. Her knees, a scream tearing from her throat, raw and ragged, echoing off the walls. Carver snatched the note, her voice barking into the radio. "Reed's got him, kidnapping in progress, move now." Her wiry frame taut as agents flooded the bunker, rifles clattering. "Thermal's cold. He's gone. Trails fresh." Tiana's vision blurred, tears streaming as she clutched the cot. "He took my baby," her voice breaking. The safe house's shield shattered. Reed's militia broadcast a ruse, his real strike ripping Malik from her arms, the task force a hollow crown. She'd worn too soon. Carver knelt beside her, her grip firm. "We'll find him, I swear." Her radio crackling with Pierce's voice. "Reed's playing us. Syndicate chatters spiking. National uprising. Clay was a decoy." His tone grim, a storm she'd underestimated. Tiana rose, shaky but fierce, wiping her face. "I'm coming!" Her flats pounding the floor as she grabbed the pistol from a table, its weight cold and sure, Reed's note a fire in her chest, her son's sketches scattered. Like ash, the bunker's piece a lie she'd bought, the war exploding beyond her grasp. Agents piled into SUVs, engines roaring as they sped out. Carver briefing her. "Chatter says north, swamp edge, we're tracking." Her voice taut, the convoy cutting through the dusk, pines blurring past, Tiana's hands trembling on the key. "Gun?" Malik's face flashing in her mind, his quiet, "We're safe now," a taunt Reed had twisted into terror. She'd beaten Dunn, smashed his wrist, testified to Congress, signed on to lead, thought the syndicate's grip had snapped, but Reed flipped the script, his militia a shadow army, Malik's abduction a gut punch she couldn't dodge, the safe house a trap she'd walked into blind. The night pulsed with danger, the convoy's lights slashing the dark, Carver's radio buzzing. Heat signature 5 miles out, small figure moving. And Tiana's breath hitched, her voice a whisper. "He's alive." Clinging to that, spark as the swamp loomed ahead, Reed's vendetta a hydra she'd underestimated, her fight bending into a desperate hunt she couldn't lose. Tiana Brooks's harrowing journey unveils profound lessons about resilience, systemic racism, and the power of defiance. First, her story shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to fight through it. From enduring a racist checkpoint ambush to facing a militia siege and a syndicate bombing, Tiana battled relentless threats, proving inner strength can defy even the darkest odds. Her refusal to buckle under mockery, false arrests, and personal attacks highlights the tenacity needed to confront oppression head-on, a testament to a mother's unbreakable spirit protecting her son, Malik. Second, the tale exposes the deep, tangled roots of systemic racism, stretching beyond isolated incidents into a national network of hate. The deputy's escalation from planting drugs to orchestrating mobs, abductions, and bombings reveals a chilling truth. Prejudice often hides behind badges and authority, amplifying its damage. Tiana's connection to the FBI turned the tide, but her victories came at a steep cost, underscoring that justice demands relentless pushback against entrenched power. Finally, her story emphasizes the ripple effect of one voice. Her testimony toppled a syndicate, sparking federal action. Yet Reed's escape and Malik's abduction remind us that change is a marathon, not a sprint. Tiana's choice to lead a task force transforms pain into purpose, urging us to channel outrage into action, a call to recognize our own power against wrongdoing. What lesson hits you hardest from Tiana's fight? Drop a comment with your thoughts, hit like if her grit inspires you, and subscribe for more tales of defiance. Share this with someone who needs to see resilience in action. Thank you for joining her battle, and may you find strength to face your own storms with unwavering hope.